sniper shooting of 12 Dallas police officers reverberates in every U.S. city. An arrest after San Diego's big homeless problem took a deadly turn. And Irwin Jacobs has revived his plan to remove cars from the center of Balboa Park. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today are Laura Wingard, News and Digital Editor for KPBS. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Mark.
Reporter Lisa Halverstad, a Voice of San Diego. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Mark.
Glad you're back today. And Roger Sholey, who covers growth and development for the San Diego Union Tribune. Hi, Roger.
Hi, Mark.
Well, 5 officers are dead, 7 more wounded, along with 2 civilians. They were shot by a sniper in camouflage who told police he was there gunning for white cops. The horror played out on the streets of Dallas last night amid a peaceful demonstration against a pair of fatal shootings in Baton Rouge and a suburb of St. Paul. Dallas Police Chief David Brown said this last night about the murder of his officers: "There are no words to describe the atrocity that occurred in our city. All I know is that this must stop, this divisiveness between our police and our citizens." Laura, police in Dallas, they ended that. They sent in a robot, actually, with a bomb and killed this suspect at the end of this long thing. What do we know about this suspect in this case?
Well, his name is Micah Johnson, and he's 25. He's from the Dallas area. He served in Afghanistan, and he was an Army veteran. It's not clear if he acted alone, but it's looking more and more like he did not, and that there were others involved. We also know that at this point there is no connection with him and the Black Lives Matter movement, which was what was being protested last night. Those were the people behind it.
Right. I should say the Dallas Morning News reporting here at midday that this was from an anonymous commander in the police department. He said that Johnson didn't act alone. The shooting was a conspiracy, according to this police official. I'm sure a lot more will come out on this. The mayor was asked about that, and mayor of Dallas, and he said we're not going to talk about that particular thing today. We did have Dallas Police Chief Brown, who I should tell our radio listeners is African American. He talked last night about what the suspect said when he was cornered by officers. Let's hear that.
He wanted to kill officers, and he expressed killing white people. He expressed killing white officers. He expressed anger for Black Lives Matter. None of that makes sense. None of that is a reason or legitimate reason to do harm to anyone.
All right. Now, Texas, of course, is known for its gun culture. It's legal to carry, openly carry in that state here. What do we know about the Dallas Police Department? What's their reputation in terms of community relations?
Well, it's led by David Brown, who has been there in that department for 4 decades. He's been the chief since 2010. And he has a very good reputation. He is well liked in the community because he's been tough on cops. If you do wrong, you get punished. One example I read, I guess 3 officers beat up a motorcyclist. It was captured on video. They tried to cover it up, the officers, and he fired them, and he released the video to the public to show that they had been lying. So that has given him a lot of credibility with the public. He's also just emphasized, since he became chief in 2010, de-escalating. When you're a cop and you have to interact with a member of the public, and if it gets tense, if it gets confrontational, de-escalate. And that has been very successful there. They've had fewer officer-involved shootings and things like that. Fewer
than many other cities, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think it generally has a very positive, it's got a very positive reputation.
We do have one more bite. This is from the mayor of Dallas at that same press conference last night about the police department's reputation.
And this year, we have the fewest police officer-related shootings than any large city in America. So we are working hard to improve, and there's always room for improvement, but we are best in class, we feel.
All right, and of course he's making the point that you noted there. Now, the dead suspect told police in this long standoff that he was retaliating for police shootings of black people. We had 2 of those tragedies this week. Remind us the high points of what happened in those incidents.
Well, in Louisiana, it was a man, an African-American selling CDs. A call comes into the police of a man with a gun, and they arrive on the scene, and it escalates. It gets captured on video, and he's on the ground with several officers on top of him when he's shot to death. So that happened in Louisiana. A couple days later in Minnesota, we have this incident where a man's pulled over for a broken taillight, which people of color will tell you is why they get pulled over all the time.
Minor infractions like that.
Right, and he's an African-American. His girlfriend's in the car, her 4-year-old daughter in the car. He tells the officer, I have a permit to carry a gun. The girlfriend says that he was getting out his ID, which the officer had asked for. The officer says, I'm afraid, the officer's story is that, he was reaching for a gun. He shot and killed him inside the car. The girlfriend streamed it live on Facebook in the aftermath.
Yeah, and I wanted to get into that. We all deal with this, of course. The modern media is all about social media. It's at the core of this, and these videos are kind of a new witness in recent years to incidents like this. And how much of a catalyst is social media on stirring people up, getting them angry, and provoking some of this reaction?
I think it's huge
Lisa.
in today's world, and I think that this is a new form of citizen journalism that we're seeing that also empowers different communities that didn't have the power to get their story out before. And one thing that really struck me about this girlfriend sitting in the car was how composed she was as she explained the situation, repeatedly referring to the officer as sir. And her idea in doing that was that she wanted millions of people to see this video, because then that empowers her and others like her to get that story out and force a conversation.
Well, in the past, it was always he said, she said, and people believed the officers. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'm sure the officers were telling the truth, but sometimes they weren't. Mm-hmm. But there was no one there, and people believed the person with the badge.
Mm-hmm. And now you have this new video witness, as it were. We can go all the way back to 1991 in the old-fashioned days, the Rodney King, the infamous incident there. And the reason I bring that up is, of course, that was an old-fashioned camcorder, didn't have the phones and all the instant video that we have today. But he raised that one question, that profound question out of that whole tragedy: can't we all just get along? President Obama is asking that. We have the mayor and the police chief in Dallas pretty much asking the same thing here, and it doesn't appear that we can.
This has been a sad week for, I would hope, for all Americans. This is just, it's almost incomprehensible what has unfolded. And coming on the heels of Orlando, where clearly, people who are vulnerable, homeless people in our community here in San Diego being attacked, it's a sad time, I think, to be an American. And why can't we all get along?
Roger?
Laura, I guess what I don't understand, well, I'm wondering whether, not to say this is inevitable, but the NRA says we should all carry guns to protect ourselves. Well, now they have an example where the authorities are targets from people who are carrying guns. So, I mean, we're at the end of this argument about should we have guns, shouldn't have guns. You can see the ultimate result in this case.
Well, and they've been curiously silent this week in the 2 previous shootings we're talking about, where the black citizens were shot who were carrying guns and legally carrying guns. And if you got to wonder if those were white victims, if they wouldn't have said, why are police shooting these people who are legally carrying a weapon here? So, I mean, the race and the whole layers of this is very, very multifaceted, Laura.
Gun violence and racial disparities. This has been decades old in America.
The story of
These
America.
are just, you and I spoke this morning. I've been pulled over for a taillight. I didn't fear for my life. I thought that officer's going to give me, he tells me my light's out, he gives me a fix-it ticket. I don't have to fear for my life. Eric Holder, former Attorney General of the United States, he tells his son what to do if he gets pulled over by the cops.
African-American, of course.
And
yeah.
African-American. It's a whole different world if you're a person of color.
Yeah, it absolutely
and
is.
on the social media thing, they had this new camera you can wear that takes a picture every 30 seconds. I mean, the ultimate thing is going to be everyone's be carrying cameras all the time, recording everything they do to ward off this.
And I do think the police body-worn cameras, the police chief in Dallas is a big proponent of them. Shelley Zimmerman has advocated them here, the sheriff. I think they're going to be a game changer as well, because we'll have those videos from crime scenes, we'll have video from, everybody seems to record everything now, and from witnesses on the street. I think it's going to be a game changer in how law enforcement acts and how things get prosecuted.
All right, well, we're going to move on now to, unfortunately, another kind of shocking crime. And 2 homeless men were killed, 2 more seriously injured recently in San Diego. The attacks came while they were sleeping, and San Diego police yesterday announced an arrest, which made national news. Lisa, who's the man police say is responsible for these attacks?
36-year-old Anthony Paget of Chula Vista, but we know very little about him or any motive behind this at this point.
Okay, how did they zero in on Anthony Paget?
You know, the police really aren't providing that much detail right now. They're really adamant that they have a lot of work still to do on this case. But I will note that a Chula Vista source had mentioned to NBC7 San Diego that this individual was definitely the same individual who'd been arrested for setting his homeless friend on fire in 2010 and had been sentenced.
So the same type of incident back then.
Same type of incident, and very troubling.
And then there was speaking of video, there was a security camera that did have him, and the police aren't saying how they connected that video to him at this point. And as you say, a lot more details we expect will come out.
Many more details.
In days ahead.
Hopefully.
Well, backing away from that particular incident, which again made national news before the whole Dallas thing broke last night, these attacks, they're shocking, but being homeless in San Diego or any American city is a violent existence, is it not?
It really is. I think, you hear many stories, and Megan Burks from KPBS certainly published a great one this week, just with people talking about the dangers and the fear that they face on the street. Sleeping on the street is not a comfortable existence, and shelters themselves, if we think that's maybe a safe spot for someone to go, those can be really scary places for people too.
And it's not just downtown where we see them congregating in East Village, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's really all over San Diego. There's homelessness pockets everywhere.
What's interesting is that overall homelessness per the regional point in time count that happens every year is slightly down, but street homelessness, people in tents, people literally sleeping on the streets, is up about 19% countywide.
Okay, Laura?
And just to illustrate the point of how dangerous it is, we took a suspect off the street yesterday, we being our police department. They took this man off the street, but another homeless man was assaulted last night near Hazard Center in Mission Valley. And, he was just a homeless man living down there, probably along the river.
Well, it is kind of odd that the homeless are ganging up on each other. Why is that?
Well, I think it's a pretty complicated situation. I mean, you have some people who have mental illnesses, you have some people who are addicted to drugs, you have people that have been alienated from their communities. But I would say the majority of folks do congregate in groups and do kind of partner up.
Watch each other's backs a little bit.
Watch each other's backs, but there are different folks, and those were really the folks that people were especially concerned about, who prefer to get away from the crowd, who prefer to sleep on their own, maybe out of fear or for some other reason. And that's really who a lot of the homeless advocates were really concerned about. So we were hearing in the past week a lot of warnings to sleep together. Maybe consider sleeping during the day, because at night you're so vulnerable, even if you are with a group.
Be aware of your surroundings, etc. We did, KPBS this week, we asked Councilman Todd Gloria if the city's doing all it can to address the issue of homelessness. Here's what he said.
I think too often the discussion about homelessness really centers around Thanksgiving and Christmas, or maybe when we have a lot of out-of-town visitors for something like the All-Star Game. Folks cannot just care about this issue when it's interesting or convenient. It has to be something that is cared about every single day. I actually think that San Diegans do care about this problem every day of the year, but we have to care about it, we have to fund it, and we have to prioritize it. And I think that for folks like myself who've been working on homelessness issues for decades, it's difficult when perhaps the most common topic of conversation in the political dialogue in San Diego is a football stadium and not ending homelessness.
All right, now we talk about reactive things, and of course the arrest with the police this week we've discussed. What are some of the things that the city's doing proactively, a couple of programs that you've been writing about lately that they're doing?
I would say, if I were to give an overarching picture of what folks are trying to do right now, our leaders, is to try to take more of a systemic approach to this, rather than where in the past there were lots of different folks, meaning nonprofits, governments, doing different things and sometimes rowing in different directions. That's still happening, but there are some big efforts that are underway. One is at the city of San Diego level. They're looking to house 1,000 veterans over the next year from March to March, since that's when the program started. And they're throwing a number of incentives at landlords and have also offered up a bunch of vouchers. So we'll definitely be watching to see how successful that is. Also, there's a county-wide group that Todd Gloria, who we just heard from, actually leads, called the Regional Continuum of Care Council. Kind of a mouthful to say, but this group has kind of taken over more regional aspects, kind of looking to see how are we addressing regional goals. So in the past, San Diego has been behind on goals. The federal government had set a goal for us to end veteran homelessness in 2015, at the end of 2015. That didn't happen. And so the goal of this group is to be watching and pulling everyone together, and also making it so if you were to walk in the door of a different nonprofit, you could potentially be paired with services from another that might better serve you. They're also looking to try to make a list of all the homeless veterans in San Diego. And these are things, like I said, that are really an effort to work on the system and not just on an individual area.
Are we also behind a bit in housing first, and this concept is kind of not what San Diego's been following, with more traditional transitional services, that is, instead of actually just placing people in homes?
Yeah, so San Diego actually, by my last count, has more transitional housing than just about any other metro in the country. Now, transitional housing means essentially that you provide the services up front, get that person ready to go into housing, maybe for up to 2 years, and then move them into housing. And now the goal is give them the housing first. And I should certainly note that the county has just made a really big announcement that is a very big deal and is more toward the housing first goal, called Project One for All. And that effort is to house 1,250 homeless folks who have serious mental illnesses over the next 2 years. And that is very significant. That is the biggest investment that our region has made in the housing first approach yet. But we still have a lot of work to do.
All right, we have run out of time in this segment, but there's a lot of follow-up stories and a lot of things to watch, as you noted here, as we go forward. All right, well, 2 San Diego landmarks, Balboa Park and Seaport Village, are being targeted for major makeovers, one of them for the second time. Well, Roger, start with Balboa Park. Plan to eliminate cars from Plaza de Panama. I hit some snags, but it's back in the fast lane, as it were.
There's a disconnect between these sad stories and park planning and city planning, but those things have to go on at the same time. We can't stop everything. And in the case of Balboa Park, 6 years ago, Erwin Jacobs, the Qualcomm founder.
And we should say a major supporter of KPBS.
Right. He proposed an idea for finally solving the problem of cars versus pedestrians in Balboa Park. The city council approved it. Soho, the Save Our Heritage organization, sued it against it. They eventually lost, and there's a couple weeks ago, Dr. Jacobs came back and said, I'm ready to start this over again.
Okay.
And just to describe what it is,
right.
He's proposing that we build a bypass off the Cabrillo Bridge on the west side of the park, route cars around there over to the Spreckles Organ Pavilion parking lot where they would build a new garage, and then the property in between on the plazas and the streets would all be back into pedestrian use.
And the garage would be underground, all entirely or mostly underground?
Well, not really under, but it's level with the ground, so it seemed like it would be underground.
I see. Okay. All right.
So that's the interesting thing is that it cost about $45 million back then. We don't know what the estimates are today, but I found it interesting that he said he hopes that others will step up to the plate and pay for it because he already spent $11 million just on planning and legal fees. And I suppose if there's a gap at the end, he might step back in, but he doesn't want to be the lone funder on this sort of thing, and maybe that'll happen.
Now, there's one of the controversial aspects of this plan is the proposal for paid parking there. And many people say there's ample free parking, but it really wouldn't be that much paid parking in comparison to all the parking. The park explained that for us.
Well, the argument is that if they start charging for parking in this new garage and people park everywhere else, they're going to still have to pay off the bonds to build the parking garage. They're funded by the fees. So they think if you can't fill the garage, they'll just start charging everywhere else. I guess you could argue this is kind of a citywide issue about free parking everywhere, beaches, parks, whatever.
Right.
And I think urban planners would say we're at the point in this civilization where you can't have free parking. I mean, there are very few places that are free anymore. You have to pay the freight for these things. And of course, there will be free parking in Balboa Park for the immediate future. But ultimately, I mean, you go to New York City, there's no parking at all in Central Park and many other parks like that.
Soon you'll leave the cars out of the city, Laura.
Some folks have advocated that we start charging, because then people would leave their cars behind and use mass transit. It would help with climate change and achieving all those goals. On the other hand, I will say that I think one of the things that defines San Diego versus Orange County, LA, San Francisco, what makes us special, is my neighbors and your neighbors. We can go to Mission Bay Park, we can go to Mission Beach, we can go to Balboa Park.
Take the family, yeah.
You can take the family, you don't have to pay. Lots of people are out there biking, roller skating, enjoying
water,
San Diego life, and you don't have to pay for it. I hate Newport Beach. I hate those places because it's not as much fun as being here.
Well, I mean, that's nice to say, but I mean, there are 105 million parking spaces in the United States, 5 for every car. And we are getting to the point now where the land is better used for people than for their vehicles. And it reminds me of the 19th century when you had horses everywhere in stables. Well, we replaced horses with cars, and now we're in another stage where you have to be a bit more careful about where you go and how you get there.
Well, let's speak the lines. We're talking about parking now. We got Councilman Todd Gloria again. Here's what he had to say about that there.
I think that we have to be mindful this is a public park, that we should do whatever we can to keep that number as low as possible, and that any proceeds, like our other community parking districts, should be reinvested back into the park. Everyone knows that there's a maintenance problem in the park. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of maintenance needs that we don't have funding for. If this could be used to benefit the long-term health of the park, I think that's a no-brainer.
All right, as long as we've got Councilman Gloria, he's pretty optimistic about this project's chances overall. Let's hear that bite on that one.
I believe it'll go through, and I believe it'll be implemented. I voted for this plan 4 years ago. We have went to court over it. The city prevailed, and the philanthropic support for constructing it, to my understanding, is there. And so I believe the project, according to the mayor, is going to proceed.
All right, well, he's leaving the council, but what do you think, Roger?
Well, there's one point that's above all this, and that is that when there were the lawsuits, he walked away from Balboa Park and said, I'm done with Balboa Park, I'm going to go on to my other issues.
He being?
Urban Jacobs.
Yes.
And then other big donors in San Diego basically said the same thing.
Right.
So you can argue pro or con about the details, but the bigger question is, if you're going to upset San Diego's philanthropic community, and you're just going to shoot yourselves in the foot.
Right.
And I understand what people say about his plan, certain elements of it they don't like, but you have to look at the big, kind of the bigger picture of if he's not going to pay for it, are you going to pay for it?
Yeah, who is? And we don't want taxes or even parking fees. Let's shift a little west to Seaport Village here. Going to be a makeover there too. First of all, does it need a makeover? Seaport, put us in the place.
This is another example of money. If San Diegans are not going to raise taxes, then you have to turn to other people to improve things for you. And in this case, Seaport Village opened in 1980. Nice, cutesy, here's that sort of Seaport Village. It really has nothing to do with
descriptive name, but nothing
It has
else.
nothing to do with San Diego architecturally or land use or anything. It's the old ferry landing.
Cape Cod on the west coast.
So the Port District, which runs that, is in charge of that land, said we need to redevelop it. And so this is among several other redevelopment projects they have going on San Diego Bay. And they have a personal or a institutional interest in doing this because they're only getting about $2.5 million or so from the Seaport Village lease.
So they want to kick up the revenue stream.
So there are six developers.
Yeah, and you can't give us all the details, but give us the high points of some of these things. There's some exotic things.
There are 6 developers in the circling around this. Next week, the port's going to hear from them what their plans are from hotels and aquariums and arenas and new parkland and
big Ferris wheel and
a spire and a lookout tower. So anyway, potentially the port could get 10 times as much money per year, and they say we need that because we have all these parks and everything else to maintain.
Mm-hmm. So the public going to have a big input on this? There's going to be some hearings on this, and of course there always is, and I imagine a lot of people will show up. There's a lot of money at stake. Who's going to fund all this stuff?
It's all developer paid, so there's no public involvement.
What about the California Coastal Commission? It seems to me like all these plans, what I've read of your stories, it's like, are they going to be okay with sort of walling off a piece of, San Diego Bay?
Well, they're not against development. They just want to have public access assured. And in this case, they want enough parking. They want to make sure that you honor the water. There's also the question of what are tidelands for? So there's a question of commercial versus recreational and so on. And they also realize the port has to pay for things that they demand. And one of the things that's coming out is, if you put more hotels in there, will there be affordable hostel type units? And some of the developers say, yes, that's what we're planning to do.
All right. And real quick, when are they going to pick a plan?
Wednesday, they will hear the plans, and by the end of the year, they'll probably pick one of the developers.
All right, very good. Well, that wraps up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Laura Wingard of KPBS News, Lisa Halverstad of Voice of San Diego, and Roger Scholey of the San Diego Union Tribune. A reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.